welcome everybody to this Zoom call by chimpanzees, and it's all about tips by an OT for fine motor skills, and this is specifically really for children with autism or developmental delays. So just a little bit about me. My name is Catherine Williams, and I'm a paediatric OT, occupational therapist, and I volunteer with chimpanzees too. And I've been working with children who have just a real variety of neurological differences for around 28 years, in mainstream schools, in special ed, in children's homes, in loads of different sort of locations and so on. And I've got some postgraduate training in working with children with cerebral palsy, autism, dyspraxia or DCD, ADHD, brain injury, and sensory processing issues too. And I suppose I'm all about helping children and their families to have sort of an enhanced quality of life, to actually be able to have some fun and work on participation, which is a bit of a watchword in OT, but it's basically about being able to do the things that they want to do with their family, in their learning environment, and in community activities. I have a private practice in Wiltshire, and that's sort of me basically. So today's session, we're going to be covering some practical ideas about play, learning, self-care, and developing a bit about developing pencil skills or pen skills. And the format's going to be that I'll do quite a few slides that are all around sort of theory and background information about sort of child development, and what I've tried to do is pick out a few highlights of some slightly unusual bits of information that you may or you may not have heard before, just to sort of add some interest really. And then after those slides, I'm going to then go into the tips and ideas for developing specific areas of fine motor skills, and then we're going to be able to have time for question and discussion together at the end. We've already had a little chat about families who are on the line today, so we will head on into the first slide. Okay, so there's lots that could be talked about how fine motor skills develop, but it's really important that we talk about the bigger body stuff first, really. And if you look in the first picture here, and this little guy here, he's lying on his back, and his shoulder blades are supported by the floor, and that's enabling him to reach forward to have a go at sort of starting to swipe at the baby gym things that are above him. And chances are, if he was sitting up and was sort of relatively unsupported, he wouldn't be able to do that reaching. And what's happened is it's the stability of the floor supporting his shoulder girdle, and specifically his shoulder blade, has enabled him to then start to reach forward. So we already know that stability and positioning is actually really important. And the other little one to his right there is doing some quite nice stuff. Really, is on the front. Really leaning on their left arm, and they're doing their weight shift onto that arm, so they're learning to stabilize on one part of their shoulder girdle, and that's enabling them to, it's freeing up the ability to reach with the right. So they're doing something quite different, and it's a more advanced skill, and as certainly physios and OTs both look at these skills in children. So there are certain things through child development that actually that free up the hands and enable a child to start to use their hands. There's something else that not sort of everybody knows about, is the eye, hand, mouth triangle. So children will kind of pick up something and go, oh, that's really interesting. And then they'll look at it and they'll put it in their mouth, and they'll kind of have a chew on it, and then they'll take it out, and they'll maybe get the other hand in the mouth at the same time, and there's a lot of rummage around that goes on, and there's a lot of sort of almost comparing, like, that looks like this, it feels like this in my hand, and it feels like this in my mouth, and it's really, this is a really, really important phase for so many different areas of child development. And I've kind of I listed them here. There's some stuff there around sort of general body awareness, but it also builds some stability of the jaw, but also of the shoulder girdle, because the chewing on things actually activates lots of muscles that are to do with the shoulder girdle. So it's actually still really important for that stability of reach. It's really good for the kind of stuff going on inside the mouth with the tongue, coordination, and maybe desensitizing and learning to deal with different shaped things rather than just a teat or a nipple in their mouth. So really important for weaning. obviously therefore really important for talking, and the development of eye-hand coordination and so on. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, and that's a really important phase. And it is interesting that some children with developmental delays often get stuck in that phase, or you might see children who, I've certainly known children to go around kind of a playroom and select certain shaped toys to want them in their mouth, and there's something about the stability that having something in their mouth provides that actually enables a child. And often those are children who are quite low tone, who quite like having something in their mouth. And there's a whole other sort of area of therapy that looks at the importance, in fact, of that, of the sort of the mouth stability and the importance of midline that helps children with coordination issues. So it's a really fascinating area. But just to say, seeing a child doing something like this is like the tip of the iceberg of what the developmental implications and importance are for that child. So some children I do see who are stuck in that phase or they still mouth things, and you kind of have to do the detective work to know what it is that they're getting out of that. Why is it? Children behave in ways for a reason, and you want to kind of find out what it is that they're kind of needing more of in their developmental stage. Okay, so then there's the sensory development that goes on in the hands. So our hands learn to discriminate what things are. So to be able to tell what things are, we've got millions and millions of different types of sensors in our fingers and in our hands that are about temperature, that are about like point or blunt, or whether something's soft or hard, and the sort of the texture of things, rough. And you know those books that where little ones you read with little ones about that's not my fairy or that's not my dinosaur, and they're all scratchy or all soft and fluffy, and all of that sort of experience is super important for a child, a young child, but also might persistently be important for an older child to actually be able to feel how rough some sandpaper is, or feel how rough, I don't know, or feel how smooth some tin foil is perhaps in the kitchen, thinking of things that are much more sort of age appropriate for an older child. Then the other thing that will be going on, so not just about touch, but actually about where my hands are in space. So some of you may well have read some information or done the sensory talk and learned, or the proprioception talk with Steph, and learned about proprioception, but essentially that's feedback from our muscles and joints that tell us where we are in space. If I close my eyes, I still know where my hands are, even though I can't see them and I'm not touching anything. So it's this sense of our body map, and kinesthesia is more about sort of mapping movements. So interestingly, this is a really, really important sense for us to know how hard or how softly, how to shape our hand around something. And we anticipate through experience about something. So I've got a picture of a hamster being picked up here, which might seem like it's a slightly random thing to have on a slide. But actually, if you can imagine, if you are going to hold something as small and fragile with those tiny little bones and wiggly, I mean, it's not for everybody, I completely understand. But you're not going to be squeezing the life out of that little thing. You know, you're going to be wanting to take care of it. And I think being able to judge your grasp to the just right amount is a really important skill. And I know that it is an area that lots of children struggle with, and I know there are people on the call today whose children struggle with this. So what proprioception does is it gives us feedback about where we are in space and about how much strength we're providing. But it also then, if that was quite successful, the action, it enables us to then predict again and anticipate, and we call it feed forward, so anticipate how to do the action again. And also we start to make associations. So for example, I've got quite a chunky glass here. So if I had one of those fragile little crinkly cups that you get out of a vending machine, I wouldn't be using the same kind of grip. I'd be using a much more sort of delicate grip, perhaps a little bit like holding that hamster actually. I'd be using a very different kind of grip to the quite a big chunky sort of grip I need to make for my drink there. So it means that also we can anticipate. Also, the thing about touch discrimination, and also it links up with proprioception, it means that we can rummage in our bag and feel for that pen or that lipstick, or we can have a pocket full of change and know which is a 5p and which is a 50p just by touching it. So that's called stereognosis, the ability to tell by touch alone what something is. And all of these skills mash up to enable us to be really refined in our skills in fine motor. And where there are breakdowns in those areas, often children will have difficulty judging the amount of force and that they need. So they've got a problem with their feedback from touch and probably as well as proprioception and kinesthesia. So then, obviously, children learn to let go of stuff. We have some grasp reflexes. So very little babies will have a grasp reflex. It's really sweet. You put your finger there, and they will grasp hold of your finger, and they can't let go yet because they haven't learnt about voluntary letting go. So releasing against something is a really important first skill that sort of starts to develop. And very typically, a child will learn to let go against your hands. So they will let go against a surface, so against your surface, your hand or a tray or something like that. Then the child actually very quickly will learn about passing hand to hand, and usually it's a kind of I'll pull it out of that hand and I'll pull it out of that hand, that sort of thing going on. And then we get into the phase where there's everything on their tray and they just chuck everything, and it's called casting, and there's been some chat about that in the people on our call today, the sort of the throwing away. And I think at this point it could be quite easy to sort of over reinforce that. It's a really important stage because children are learning about, I've got this thing on my tray and oh, now it's gone. They're learning about object permanence, that actually that object is still there even if I can't see it, even if it's gone from my immediate world, it's still there. So you play all sorts of games hiding things under cloths for the children to learn to sort of, oh, it's still there, like all that peekaboo sort of stage. But actually, I said to people on the call the last time I did this talk was that this can become a habit. It can become a bit of a pantomime that, woohoo, you know, we're making loads of noise. And it's very easy because it's kind of a little bit interactive, and it can become very habitual. It can become very much sort of the only thing that children do with things is throwing away. And, you know, also you then become staff. Basically, you're just constantly picking up after your child and putting it back on for them to chuck it off again. And you kind of go, wow, no, you've thrown it away again. Whether in fun or in frustration, whatever you do, you're communicating something and you're kind of rewarding it. And actually, when you get to the stage that this is now stopping the child from doing purposeful things, like starting to put things into containers or starting to click things together, then we need to sort of break that cycle. And certainly as a therapist over the years, I've had to sort of get involved in helping to break that cycle. So really what we're looking for is ultimately this, to get involved in posting games. So there's a homemade poster box that I just lifted off the internet there. It's not one that I've made, but it's super easy to make a posting box of some description. And I would say perhaps this would be appropriate for an older child who's still learning certain skills. So I've used things like just a tissue box, just taken all the tissues out and you can post stuff in there. I really like things like Pringles tubes that have the metal base at the bottom, or the canisters of drinking chocolate that are sort of cardboard with metal on the bottom, because when you drop stuff in there, so long as your child isn't averse to noises or loud noises, it sounds really ace when you drop stuff in there. It kind of goes a bit boingy. So it's really good fun posting into things like that. I've even, for an old child who's learning about release skills and posting and things, I've made things out of I've gone to the hardware store and I've just picked up some guttering and I've kind of created a thing with guttering, and then we've dropped golf balls and stuff like that into there for posting. So you can make posting toys out of almost anything and everything. And then a child will learn on to move on to actually putting something into a specific sort of area. So these inset puzzles we've got here at the bottom, and then graduate on to doing a bit of sorting out. So not just posting anything, you'll then start to post the circle or post the square, and also potentially you will be sorting things. And this is a really important phase for development. So being able to pick something up and put it somewhere else means that you can match all the yellow dinosaurs onto the yellow plate and put all the red dinosaurs into the red cup. And you can start to do some stuff with language and with differentiating different objects. And this ability to categorize is a really important developmental stage. So learning to post will enable you to sort, and learning to sort is really important for cognitive development and language development. And it's a really foundational skill. So it's something that as an OT I will be looking for, and making sure that if it's not me, that there's some other person who's looking after this area of development. Sometimes speech and language therapists, sometimes portage workers do it. Sometimes, you know, it might be going on in school or in nursery, but it's super important that somebody somewhere is working on this area with your child. Particularly for thinking about the young children or the older children who are still at an earlier developmental stage. So that's why posting is important, because it enables you to move on with your other skills. So developing grasp skills. So we're talking about letting go. Now we're just thinking about kind of picking stuff up. So it's going to be a big whole hand grasp to start with. It's going to be using a big movement. And there are diagrams all over the place. You can Google, developmental sequence of grasp. It's really easy to find out, lots of images. But essentially, it'll be a big movement. And then what will happen is you'll start to mold your hand around the object. So if it's just a little bit awkward, you will mold your hand differently round something like this. Then say something like this. Then I'm just trying to see what else I've got. I've got my phone, a different grasp in my phone. So what you'll start to do is just change and mold. And so the toys and activities that I would use in therapy as an OT, I'll be thinking about, actually, are they using their whole hands, or are they a bit stuck just doing this, or are they just doing fingertip? Actually, maybe we need something big. So we'll start doing things like taking the lids off big things, or we'll start stacking large things. So it's really important to look at how the child is molding their hand, and that's a really important stage, actually. Then what will happen is, when you pick your phone up and you're like, oh, it's just not quite right, and you change the grip. So then you start to, so that's what you start to change your grip to suit the function, and to optimize how you're able to do the task. Okay, so that's also a really important stage, and a lot of children with developmental delays will not do that. So perhaps they might have a small variety of grasps, but what they don't do is kind of go, oh, there might be a better way of holding this. They don't do that little subtle movement. And you sometimes see that when a child's learning to feed themselves, that they kind of have one action, they just do this, and what they're not doing is kind of deciding, oh, which angle's going to be a bit better, optimizing. And lots of hand over hand and so on is needed at this stage, but also just lots of fun and trial and error with different things. But it's something as an OT I would be looking for. So then obviously you're thinking about the ability to let go and grasp again, let go and grasp again. And this re-grasping is really, really important. So next time you're, I don't know, even just cooking, chopping things up, or I don't know, putting your makeup on, or even adjusting your clothing or doing clothing, think about how often you re-grasp something. And what we see very often with children with delays, and often children with autism, because they haven't always got the variety of experience or they don't go out looking for the variety of experiences and play that other children do, that often what they miss is the ability to re-grasp and just optimize their grip on things. And then you get to the stage where you can do super complex things, problem solving, and you can hold multiple objects at a time. You think about, I don't know, you're going up at the end of the evening and you're tucking some laundry under your arm, you've maybe got your phone, you've maybe taken a glass of water with you, or when you notice that there's something else and you sort of pick it up awkwardly, and you can do all sorts of really cool things with your hands. So that's a really sophisticated sort of grasp skill. And also then obviously there's specific stuff around tool use. So I shall tell you about that in a minute. But first of all, I'm going to tell you about something that not everybody knows about. So as an OT, I sort of feel like it's kind of a nice thing to tell you about, is that we've got three main nerves that come into the hand that sort of cover different muscle groups and help us to do different kinds of actions. There's something called separation of the arches, and also stabilizing the hand, that not everybody's aware of. So all of our hands could be quite curved like this. So you've got an arch here, and you've got an arch there, and there's an arch there. So it enables us to cup our hands. If you're trying to hold something, catch some water, or hold on to, I don't know, juggle some change in your hands, something like that. So we've got quite shaped hands. There are some children I see, particularly children with low tone, who find it very hard to have cupped hands, and they sort of will hold their hands out like this and can't do that. And actually there's lots of muscles inside the hand that allow us to sort of develop that cup shape. And as an OT, that would be something that I would work on, but I've got some ideas for that a bit later on. But the other thing, the really neat thing, is that this side of our hand, the little finger and so on, that's our power side. So if you think about trying to open a door or open a jar, it's that side of the hand that enables us to get the movement going. So that's our stability side, and this is the movement side. So again, just like we needed stability at the shoulder to be able to reach and use the arm, this side of the hand gives us stability, and this is the bit with the precision and the movement. So quite often I use this in therapy, and I use this with children who are learning to write at the right sort of age and stage. I ask them to put a little treasure. So I've actually got tiny Teddy here, but I'm going to tuck him underneath these two fingers, and then that leaves these fingers here to do an activity. And I've got my favorite kind of pencil here that's nice and shaped, that will enable me to move. And that's a neat little therapy trick, but actually it really helps children to develop their fine motor skills. So you could try it yourself, you know, just a screwed up little piece of paper, a little blob of blue tack, some other little treasure like a Lego man. I have been known to use little Lego men under there, a jewel or something like that. Something really interesting to think about, but it does really help children to develop. And actually doing that enables us stable. It really helps children to start to use these hands for their pencil skills. So there's the kind of fine motor progression, and the way in which fine motor skills or hand skills are used in play goes something like this, in that, you know, we saw that early that little 3-month-old who was sort of bashing and swiping and jiggling things, and here children are just kind of learning about, what are these things on the end of my arms? Oh, these are quite useful, that's really interesting, and oh, I'm feeling some quite nice sensations from that. So just developing that eye-hand sort of quality of play and the ability to reach. Then the container play stage, which is the sort of reaching, the targeting, learning to let go at a specific point. Then sorting and posting, which we've talked about, and then and with that you get the grasp, the regrasp, the moving of the wrist, the sort of reposition, maybe rotating things. Then you're at that sort of fixing together stage, so the ability to kind of maneuver things, line them up and manipulate them. So you have to do quite a lot of movements to be accurate with that sort of thing. And then there's the use of tools. I'm going to talk about those in a sec. So you would use tools maybe a little bit randomly, sort of wafting things around, holding things, shaking things, maybe bashing to create some music or some sound, and in play, and then maybe purposefully about feeding yourself, feeding Teddy, brushing hair, starting to sort of think about brushing teeth, and then ultimately that will lead on to things like handwriting and so on. And it's probably just worth saying that, you know, that we develop our skills through practice and refining our skills, and that some skills just don't happen by random accident, that you know, they need a lot of reinforcing and a lot of practice, and therefore they need a lot of sustained attention and really good body feedback to help the child feel that this is really working. And a lot of you might need to be an external motivator, and you might need to give external feedback to say, I like the way you did that circle and made a face that looked like mummy, or I like the way you made my hair look curly, whatever it is. And you might kind of need to give that sort of external feedback. I'm just going to talk a little bit about dominance and hand dominance and sort of coordination. So there's a developmental sequence that goes on whereby both hands will do pretty much the same thing. So there'll be lots of bashing and swiping, and there's the same action going on at the same time. At this time, sort of early, sort of 3-4 month old, what you might see is one hand's doing one thing and the other one's kind of doing the same at the same time. You sometimes see that when children are quite excited, and interestingly that does persist for some children who have this as their stim movement, a lot of mirror movements. But interestingly, there are some conditions where it persists, and it's usually some sort of either a neurological injury or something else, and there are certain conditions where we see it. And interestingly, it can occur just out of the blue. I worked with a teenager who realized she had it when she was trying to teach herself to play the guitar, and she Googled why she couldn't do where she was having to do the same thing with each hand. She couldn't differentiate her function. And she discovered that she had idiopathic mirror movement syndrome. It was very interesting, which we worked with and kind of got over a little bit, in fact. But it is interesting how sometimes that persists. Anyway, then what you'll do is you'll alternate what one hand's doing. So you'll pass from hand to hand. You might start bashing things together, pass hand to hand. There is a phase at which children learn to hold one thing and then the other thing and don't let go. And some children, you know, you pass them one thing to one hand and they'll drop the thing that's in the other hand. And it's a stage at which they get to hold on to two things and then maybe start clicking it together. Then you get to the really interesting phase where one hand moves and the other hand is holding. So you'll have one hand holding and the other one kind of manipulating, where things start to get quite interesting. And this is where we start seeing dominance emerge. And in therapy, we often talk about a doing hand and a helping hand, rather than left and right, or your good hand and your bad hand. It's really not great. I don't like that terminology. So we usually talk about your doing hand and your helping hand. And everybody has a doing hand and a helping hand, unless you're truly ambidextrous. And even then, you probably have one hand that likes batting and the other hand that likes writing and the other hand that likes slicing, whatever it is, you know. And then obviously both hands can do separate things. So, you know, you learn to drive a car, you're holding and you're shifting gear. You might be learning to play the piano, different hands do different things, and so on. So that's where our dominance kind of really comes into play, but we can differentiate function with our two hands. So that's kind of developmental sequence. And then a little bit like the cupping of the hand and this separation of two different sides of the hand is in-hand manipulation. And there's a word called squirrelling, which comes up in some of the books from America that I find, and I quite like the phrase, the ability to squirrel things inside your hand. So what you can do is you could pick up several things into your hand, 1, 2, 3, like that, and then you can bring them to the front of your hand to let go and place them carefully. So that's a really important skill. So that there's all sorts of fancy names for what's going on there, but basically it's being able to move things around in your hand. Also, you should be able to rotate something inside of your hand. So the ability to do that inside the hand, and there's things like flipping a pencil over. There's things like, you know, how you can do something, you're maybe holding a child with one hand and you're trying to open a container with another hand. There's that stuff that you can do, and things like holding and pressing those pump dispenser toothpaste things. And then there's a picture of a big blob of putty down at the bottom there, and quite often I do activities with putty that have things hidden inside them that really require a lot of in-hand stability and pulling things out. I have some treasures hidden inside here I'm trying to take out. So the ability to do that. So if you think about when you go to pay a parking meter, you've got a handful of change and you could sort of feed them in one at a time. Now, these skills are really important because they underpin the ability to control a pencil. So they're really important for pencil control and refining the use of tools, things like, you know, feeding yourself using cutlery and so on. So it's really important to be able to do this, and not everybody pays attention to this side of things. And I would say, and interestingly, a lot of teachers that I chat to about this kind of go, oh, that's really interesting, actually. So I often in my programs that I write, I will include something around in-hand manipulation. So it's really worth going back to see what your children can do. Can they pick up 1, 2, 3 treasures and keep them in their hand, and then can they put them back down again, or could they put them in special places? It's really worth trying to see. So I'm just going to chat a little bit about thumbs. So one of the things that I do when I meet a new little one, or an older one even, is just check and see what's going on in their thumb, because it could be quite significant. So if you look in that left-hand picture where there's a pink arrow, this little one here, there's a kind of a dimple there, and basically this joint here in their thumb is hypermobile and has sort of subluxed. So mine is a bit like it. I have a slightly wonky thumb, but I sometimes see some very spectacular thumbs. Okay, so that means that this joint is very wobbly and unstable. There's also a picture of a very awkward looking pencil grip, which is probably because that little hand is very extra mobile and a bit wobbly, a bit low tone. And so I do check to see that. There are some other things that you can do to check for hypermobility in fingers and so on. So I would hope that a therapist meeting your child would check for that. The significance of having this hypermobility in the thumb is that when you try to hold a pen like this, you should be able to sustain this kind of like a circle shape here. But if this thumb is wobbly, or the joint is wobbly, what happens is the joint actually subluxes. When you put some pressure on through the pencil, the joint collapses, and what will happen is that thumb will start to wrap round, and it's really, really tricky for a child with those issues to control a pencil. And the answer are there's several different things that you can do. One really neat thing you can do is to put a peg around the actually I had one out, a peg around the pen, and that will enable the child to hold the pencil more easily, and that gives that stability inside the hand and takes the pressure off the thumb. And the other thing that you can do is to introduce what I call a V grasp. So instead of holding the pen like this, you put it between those two fingers. So it's still a tripod grasp, but the thumb isn't under so much pressure. So there are some things that can be done. And in fact, interestingly, the picture at the bottom there, that's the V grasp with another pencil grip in place. So it's worth checking to see if your child has a wobbly thumb, because it's important to know. Oops, I'm just going back up one. Okay, so the use of tools is often delayed in children for all sorts of reasons. So let me just double check. Yeah, okay. So this will obviously affect the way that they can use things like pencils and crayons and markers and glue sticks and so on, things like scissors, craft and modelling, then use their knife, fork, spoon, or whatever implement you use in your home to eat with. Self-care, things like cleaning teeth, wiping your bottom, wiping your nose, the ability to get that sort of action and get your tissue just right. So that's a tool that we're using. Dressing, doing things like fastenings, tying shoelaces and so on, and then cooking and all sorts of life skills. We use tools all the time as adults. And so this is something that's really important, and it is often a phase that children sort of stumble over if they've got some sort of developmental delay, or if they've got some strong sensory preferences, likes and dislikes, or over or under reactions to things, certain things about touchy-feely things, and how they want things in their hands. So maybe just using fingertips means you're not going to be that great at using things that require your whole hand. So this is an important thing, and I'm going to chat more about tool use later. So that's the end of that sort of theory bit. What I'm going to talk about next, and is everybody all right? Is everybody sort of with me so far? Hopefully, yes, I've had a thumbs up, so that's always encouraging. Okay, great. So really happy to answer questions either now or we can chat at the end. So we're going to talk now about the tips and ideas that I've kind of learned over the years, and I've obviously it's stuff that I have in my tool belt, as it were, as a therapist, but also I've learned a lot from the children and families that I've worked with over the years. So what I'm going to talk about is building from all of that theory. And I'm also thinking about the varying learning styles that some children have, and the sensory processing issues, and trying to match that with a therapy task or an activity that you could very easily do with everyday things at home, to also try to provoke the motivation and get the interest of your child to actually be able to do some activities. So it's really important to try and make activities fun and engaging and interesting, even though if they're a little bit silly and daft, because actually it will mean that they're much more likely to be repeated. And if you can repeat things, it means you're going to push those skills along and take things to a new level. So I want to talk again, first of all, about the big stuff. So you don't have to do fine motor skills activities sitting at a table. It's really useful to be able to go to a table and sit at it, because that's what they do in school. However, in therapy, I feel like there's loads of other options available to us, and I have been known to go into children's dark dens. I have been known to go into one of those like books and do things like jigsaw puzzles. You know, you kind of have to, you know, go wherever the child is comfortable. So actually just lying on your tummy and doing a little bit of drawing, particularly if you had a really big piece of paper, that would be kind of fun, wouldn't it? And then you would be repeating what that little one's doing. In that first slide we have is you'd be pressing down on one arm and reaching with the other, and then you're really developing that shoulder girdle stability stuff. You could do it in 4-point kneeling, or, you know, hands and knees. You could do it in that position if it's more comfortable. Kneeling to an easel, I have to say, this half kneeling and doing painting is a pretty hardcore skill. That would be quite challenging, but I know that sometimes in therapy I might want that if, you know, my physio colleague and I were working on some kind of balance or postural stability. Simply standing at an easel, having a little, you know, a little recline in that position. And then there's a really lovely example here at the bottom where children sitting underneath a coffee table or lying underneath a coffee table and drawing on paper that's taped to the underside of a coffee table. And that's really ace. If you think about that developmental sequence, it's working on shoulder stability and allowing children just the freedom to move their arms. So I would say, don't feel that you have to, if your child is struggling to sit at the table for any period of time, just go find somewhere else to do something fun. Again, tips and ideas about using big movements. So there's the top left is a little guy, and he's got a squirty bottle and he's about to start wiping the table. Wiping the table, first of all, squirty bottles are lovely to use. They don't have to necessarily have to have any sort of chemicals in them. You know, it could just be water, couldn't it, or soapy water. But actually holding the cloth and getting the right grip on the cloth and maybe rinsing, squeezing the cloth out, those sorts of actions, and then actually reaching with the arm, they're all absolutely fantastic activities. So actually having your child have a responsibility for doing some wiping stuff down, even if you have to then go and re-wipe them afterwards, it's really worth it, because it's a really great activity for their fine motor development. Anything where they can pull themselves up. I know play parks aren't always open everywhere at the moment, but hauling themselves up, doing fun things like wheelbarrows, if it's safe to do so with the size of your child and your back health. But that's also a really fantastic thing for developing fine motor skills. Actually helping with the laundry, hauling laundry out of a washing machine. So you think about what, you know, hauling a damp duvet out, that's really fantastic for developing that proprioception, that strength in the hands, but also that body feedback. So if your child has got an issue with knowing how much pressure to apply to things, and you really need to work on grasp and holding on to things really well, doing things like laundry loading, if it's safe to do so, get them involved in that, you know, holding laundry baskets, mopping the floors. Again, you know, you might have to go and redo these activities afterwards, but it's really worth doing, and you're helping your child in their development, and really building on that sensory body map that they need for good fine motor skills. Then you'll be looking at sort of trying to help them refine their grasp. So pushing fingers into holes is a useful skill. However, obviously we need to be thinking about safety as well. And there are certain things like, you know, plug sockets and so on that we don't want them sticking their little fingers into. But if you can find a really fun and funky ice cube tray, or there's a little picture of a little one here there's a bottle and they're just sticking pom-poms in, or egg cups or egg trays, and then this little one here is just squishing little round dots of, that's therapy putty, but it could be Play-Doh or anything else. Things like finger painting. I use those. I've also got some pill boxes that you get from really cheaply from pharmacies. Sometimes they've usually got a little lid, and you can tuck things away in there, and you lift them up and you take them out. Putting their snacks, things like little bits of snacks, but in ice cube trays, so they have to poke their finger in to get them out, you know, put their raisins in there or something. It's a really fun thing to do. So just a few ideas there, but that does help with finger isolation. And then strengthening the grasp and the shape of their hand and those internal muscles that we need for stability. There's some few ideas here. So things like rinsing out, squeezing out sponges, and And cloths is a really great thing. Things like those popping and bellows toys, you often see them as stocking fillers around Christmas time, but you squeeze something and maybe the frog will jump, or some other ones where you have to squeeze and it'll shoot something out, or so that's fun. But also things like just squeezy bottles, an old washing up bottle, or an old ketchup bottle or something like that to squeeze is also really good. It's a nice example of a thing you can do with a tennis ball. Make a little hole and turn it into a funny mouth, and you can pick things up with him. Then resistive materials like Play-Doh. Plasticine's great if you can get hold of it. It is around still. It used to be sort of popular sort of when I was a child, but it is still around and it's quite good. But the stuff that I really like using is therapy putty. You can get in toy shops, you can buy things like thinking putty. I think it's got various different names, but it's also just as affordable really online now. You can get these small pots for not too much money, and they're resistive in different grades. So this is a sort of a medium soft in a red, and they're lovely, and you can stretch, you can snap it, you can squeeze it, and I've put little things inside it, buried treasure to try and pull out. And so this is really fun, and I would recommend getting some. It is non-toxic, but obviously you'd want to watch a child who tends to eat it. I have to say it does like sticking to hair, so be careful of hair. And the insides of pockets, for example, it kind of likes hanging around there. So you have to be a bit careful. But the nice thing about this is it's not slimy. So it's not like slime, and it's not as sticky as Play-Doh feels. So for children who are a little bit averse to certain textures, I've worked with a lot of children on the autism spectrum who are quite touch averse, and actually they don't mind this stuff. So that's therapy putty. Then for an older child, they could do things like stapling or hole punching, holes in card and so on, and they're quite fun. And you can get those punches that sort of cut out little shapes. They're quite good fun. It's crafting and so on. Threading pipe cleaners through a colander. There's a picture down there. That's really fun. Or actually, I've used things like slotted spoons, out of the kitchen. I've just raided the kitchen cupboard for anything with a few little holes in, and we kind of will poke things in and out of that. So that's really good fun. In craft shops, you can get those giant, really fluffy kind of pipe cleaners. They're really fun. So that's something that you might sort of think about. And again, you're doing lots of texture, and you're thinking about. And if your child's a bit averse to doing threading, that actually this is a kind of a slightly random fun thing that you end up with. Just looks, there's no particular right or wrong. It just looks interesting by the time you finished it. I've talked about bubble wrap there as well, which is of course everybody's favorite thing. Then I'm just going to talk a little bit about using tools. So tool use, I think, as I said previously, is really important. And as a therapist, I will always look for some kind of quick win. So if you can find, I thought I had my magnetic wand on here and I don't. I've got one here. Here we go. So if you can find something like, you can buy these magnetic wands on some education sites on the internet, and these are coloured bingo chips that are magnetic, but actually this will pick up anything that's metal. They're really fun. So if you've got a child who is learning to use a tool, that this is really fun, that we do magic. Like, here's your magic wand and we're going to do magic, and it's really, really fun. So anything like that, anything that's like a hammer that you can bash into. There's obviously making music is quite a good thing, but I have seen, so one of the books I recommend at the end, they have this lovely activity where you just like slice a melon in half and have a melon sitting there, and you get golf tees and a hammer. It could be maybe one of those, it could be a plastic hammer or a rubber hammer, and then you whack the golf tees into the melon, and that's really age appropriate for an old child to have a go at. And so that's learning to use tools for something that's a bit fun and a bit different. I'm quite a big fan of magnetic fishing. That's kind of fun thing to do. It's kind of good. And that's just learning to use a tool. And you can do lots of turn-taking games and so on with magnetic fishing. So I quite like that. So thinking about inventive ways of using a tool that's actually not all about just drawing or just feeding yourself is kind of nice to do. Ultimately, what will happen is that the child will start to refine their skills. So they might start holding something with a big grasp, but actually eventually they might start to be quite sort of precise with the movement they're doing. And we're looking for this finger down the shaft of whatever they're holding onto, which actually starts to help them develop things like their pencil skills, but helps with lots of other things like cutting with knives and so on as well. That's also really helps in the future. So so we're going to look to graduate from this movement or from that movement gradually to the hand pointing downwards. So you can get some other precision activities. There's a quite a nice toy that you can get called Tap a Peg, or where you have a tiny little sort of tap a little nail and a hammer, and you make pictures with it. So if you've got a child who's a bit older who isn't putting stuff in their mouth, that would be really nice for them. Just doing the coloured water pens that you can get to colour in books with water pens. You could just get a big paintbrush and a bowl of water and paint the wall outside the house, particularly, you know, with the weather getting a little bit better now. That's a really nice activity to do. And you could have big brushes and little brushes, or rollers even, if you've whatever you've got in the cupboard or in the shed. And then I'm a big fan of using things like tongs and tweezers. So you could go from like a really big tongs to pick up something, or down to little tweezers like this. This is really fun. I mean, you can imagine me at Christmas when they've got all these sort of little fun things that come with kits that you get in gift sets. I'm always grabbing them. So there he is. So you can see here that actually what I'm doing is I'm using really quite a precision grip, and it actually doesn't really work with the whole hand. I have to be more precise. That's quite a nice thing to think about doing. And again, you don't have to go and buy anything fancy. You've probably got tongs in the cupboard. You've probably got tweezers around, but you can craft shops and cook shops quite often they have, you know, an array of different things that you can buy, and usually not too expensively. Trainee chopsticks are really fun as well. My ones have just broken, but they're really, really good. They're fun to use. And again, just picking up anything, you could be just taking the socks out of the sock drawer. You know, it doesn't have to be anything sort of fancy, sort of toys or anything. Then developing strength, things like using a potato masher or your scoop. The bellows toys we've already talked about, things like rolling and cutting Play-Doh and so on. I quite like the sets that you can get with the Velcro fruit, and you sort of learn to slice through those. Again, you've got to get the pressure just right to push through, but also real life cooking. I'm going to talk about ideas with food in a second, but or cutting up Play-Doh, or even air dry clay. You know, cutting stuff like that up is also quite a good activity to try. So I've already mentioned about the doing hand and the helping hand. So here are some tips for developing the use of both hands, sort of a graded way. So activities that basically need stabilizing. So one hand is doing while the other one is kind of stabilizing. Things like stacking bricks is a great activity. It's really nice and things like clipping together trains, particularly like either the Brio, the magnetic trains, or the other ones that you have to do something a bit more complex, doing that. Pull apart and stick together toys, so Duplo or other things that kind of pop together. You can get lots of things that link or other things that pop. I have just discovered this really lovely activity called Squigs. So if you've got a birthday coming up or something like that, these activities, and they're little suction cups, and they're really fun, and they make a lovely noise when you then pull them apart. They're really good fun, and they stick onto windows, and you can play all sorts of really fun games with them. So they're worth looking out for. Then you move on to one hand holds while the other maneuvers. So things like opening boxes. In therapy, I use a lot of those little IKEA boxes, the little coloured IKEA boxes with flip top lids, but anything. Household storage pots would probably do. The bags that you get with a zip. I've got one here. And then you can get these Ziploc bags. I know we're trying to stop using plastic bags, but actually these last a long time. I reuse them a lot. Other things that you can, and twist top lids, anything with a twist top really is useful. So you can hide, you can either have snacks inside a twist top lid, or you could have, you know, favorite little things like some little stickers inside a twist top lid, take them out and play with them. Sometimes it's just that little bit of prep, and it's kind of nice because it's looking for treasures inside fun containers. Then obviously things like, I actually quite like the old-fashioned, I've got one here, it's not an old-fashioned one, it's a fancy one from IKEA, but these old-fashioned whisks. So you can make, so like Granny might have one in a drawer somewhere, but they're really fun. And you can make lots of amazing bubbles in the bubble bath, or in a you know, in a tub, or even in the paddling pool or something. So something like that is really great. So one hand stays still while the other hand's doing. It's fun. Yeah, and then things like cutting out. So I'm going to go into scissor skills in a sec. And then threading. That's where two hands will be working quite cooperatively. One has to do one thing, go through, then you have to regrasp. Everybody has to regrasp in order to be successful. And that might be a stumbling block for a child who isn't that keen on threading, in that it's the process of doing the regrasp, that knowing how to move my hand in a new way to enable me to be successful. I'm going to show you what I mean by a button snake in a second. There's a picture and I'll show you. I've got one on my desktop here to show you. So that's ideas for two hands. So here are a few tips and ideas for pencil skills. So I'm kind of, again, going in a little bit of a sort of chronological order, really. So first of all, just encourage some scribbling and making marks. And I would say, if you can, I mean, I'm really no artist, but you can have quite a lot of fun of a child will make a scribble and you can turn it into something else. So put some ears and a funny face on it, and then you've turned it into an animal or something, or into a car or a dinosaur. Or the child puts some stamps on the page and you can then add extra bits to that to make it look like a really fun picture. So the whole idea is that the child is learning that the marks or the efforts or the things that I put on the page mean something, and they're kind of fun. And it's also interactive, because if you think about it, that's what writing is all about. It's a symbolic mark. It's something that you are using to interact with somebody else. It's symbolic communication. So actually all of this stuff is really important. So make it interactive if you can. Also, some children get really freaked out by having a blank page in front of them. I have known lots of children who've really been very anxious about drawing, haven't wanted to. They might do a bit of colouring in, but then really not keen to start drawing. So I actually really love books that are complete the picture. So this is one example I've got here. So here's a lady in a car. In fact, I was using this, I photocopied it, but I was using this afternoon with a little lad, and we did giving her wheels on her car, and he was sort of, didn't really get the circle yet, but he was scribbling in the right area. And I said, oh, the lady's got pink hair, let's give her pink hair. So we ended up with pink everywhere, and then we ended up with a big pink car as well. But that was kind of fun. So actually, completing pictures is quite nice. So this one's got it's quite nice. We can put the face on the snowman and give him some arms. So they're really simple drawings. Look out for books that have complete the picture. So they really help. Also, some really simple dot-to-dot books. You know, you could, I mean, quite often I'm quite dab hand at drawing a really basic car upside down for the child to put the circles, or I can do a tractor. I'm not very good at drawing T-Rexes upside down, and I'm not that great at trains either. But if you can just get used to drawing whatever your child's into, you know, find a way of simply drawing it, and all they have to do is put on the scary teeth, or they put the smoke on Thomas or something like that. And then I've come across some really nice, really simple dot-to-dot books, if you can see, with the sort of coloured dots here. That's super, super simple, where the child learns to start sort of making marks. But then by the time they join the dots, it looks like, you know, it looks like sausage, egg and chips actually on that plate, interestingly. Okay. So then doing things like follow my pencil. So, you know, we're all into drawing rainbows, and maybe that one's kind of gone by now, but actually doing things like really doing big movements, drawing rainbows. And you see if you can chase my mark with your mark. Doing that across the body is actually a really important movement. And again, you can do that on the floor, on a big piece of paper, like if you've got any old bits of wallpaper kicking about or anything like that, you know, use the back of it. big movements. You can use, if you've got an easel, that's really nice, because using the surface of the easel for stability is a really nice thing to teach a child to get more fine motor control. You can see this little one down here is leaning against. It's really lovely. They're stabilizing that part of their hand, and then they're starting to use this part of their hand to do the drawing, and that's what we're after. And actually you can achieve that on a vertical surface or near vertical surface. Rubbing textures and so on. And then I've mentioned wiki sticks, or these waxy sticks. This is one, it's a bit hard for you to see, but basically that's like the wick from down the inside of a candle with a tiny bit of wax on the outside, and you get them in all different colors. This one's quite a small one, but I just wanted to give you the heads up that they're selling them in Aldi at the moment. So if you're interested in these, you get a pack, you get loads of different colors. They're called waxicles. And you can see that bottom left picture is little ones made a sort of a flower picture. They stick together. You can move them and they stay. You can twist them and they stay in the position that you put them. So this is lovely. If your child is perhaps starting to write their or do letters or anything, so you can make letter shapes with them and they will stick to the page, and you could then do like a brass rubbing sort of thing, or you could then go against it and use with a pencil and use it like a sort of like a stencil or a guideline. I sometimes put them round areas for children who are learning to colour specific areas and stay within the lines. I will sometimes put that round a shape in a colouring book, and they know that they're just going to colour inside there up to the edges. It's kind of a nice thing to do, so they're quite useful. Also, you can wrap them round pencils to make a pencil grip with. Super simple. So that's really nice too. So they've got lots of uses. That's kind of nice. So then obviously it's really important what the thumb can do to help use a pencil. So working on things that things like pushing little things into textures. So there's some little jewels, little flowers. They've gotten in some Play-Doh. Using that sort of action is really, really important. Things like pump dispensing, toothpaste tubes are quite nice for that as well. So getting used to using the thumb. And then the other top tip I would give is, if you've got a pack of crayons or chalks, break them up. Break them in half, at least in half, because little crayons, can you see this little guy here? He's got half a crayon, a little broken crayon, and he has to use, you can't hold that in your grip, in your fist, it just doesn't work. So if you've got a child who's learning to refine their grip, giving them little things to colour in with, it sounds a bit mean, but actually what it will do is it'll promote them using that fine grasp. And what you can do is give them that little treasure to hold here, and then they can hold that little bit and start to use it. And again, you wouldn't be asking to do them to do anything high level like actual writing, but they might just be colouring or making a little pattern and joining in an activity that you were doing with them. So we've talked about this idea of stabilising that little finger side of the hand. You can use pom-poms and all sorts of things, but that is a top tip for your child who's learning to refine their grasp. So the other thing I do with teaching children who are just starting to learn about shape and form, somewhere I've got some lolly sticks. Seem to have disappeared off my, here we are. So I use giant lolly sticks for all sorts of activities. So here's some examples. That you can buy these in craft shops. They're just lovely. They come in all different colours. So you can do things like repeat patterns with them, but you can also learn about, if you want to, you can stick some Velcro on them, but I just quite often will do them on the desktop when we're learning to draw a square, and then I'll say, oh, it's that silly orange, look what he's done, he's fallen off. Can you put him in the right place, and can the child actually just orientate the piece to the correct area? And this is a really important skill. If your child can't do that, so some children I find have genuine perceptual difficulties. They find it really hard to work out how to get the lolly stick to the right place, to the right orientation. Now, if they can't do that with a ready-made line, they're not going to manage to do ready-made lines the right way round for writing. So it's really important that your child can do things like shape construction and copy patterns and shapes and angles with something simple like this before asking them to draw. because if they can't do this, they haven't yet learned which way up things are. There's some spatial perceptual skills there and some motor planning skills that we would need to work on before they're going to go anywhere near being able to do any shapes for writing. So that's a crucial thing, and it's something that I check as an OT. We have some special assessments that we use as OTs as well to check, but that's just a simple thing that you can do at home. I use things like putting, if you've got drawing or colouring on one of those complete the picture activities, I'll pop it inside a Polly Pocket and use a dry white pen, and so that if it goes a bit wrong, it doesn't matter, you can just rub it off. So that's really nice. Complete the pictures we've talked about, dot to dot, simple mazes, colour by number activities, they're really nice. And then some non-pencil ideas, so using the big movements. So one of the books I'm going to tell you about by a guy called Alistair Bryce Clegg suggests writing like a Jedi, so Jedi writing. So here is a cheap lightsaber that I bought from Tesco's a few years ago. It actually lights up, which is really cool. And here's a pool noodle that I've put some black tape on the end, and that's also a really cool lightsaber. And then you can start doing your letter shapes, or you can do any sort of squiggly lines you want, or you can even copy what the other person's doing in a mirror activity. So you're using the big movements, but perceptually you're working on, you could just be going up and down lines. Can you do an up and down line? Can you do an across line? Now can you do up and down and then across or something? So that's kind of really fun activity that you might be able to do at home, and lots of people have things like magic wands and stuff like that in their toy boxes that you might be able to use. So yeah. So then using scissors. Now some people sort of see that as being a little bit of a sideline, but actually scissors are really, having scissor skills is really important. So I'm going to give you a few top tips for learning to use scissors. First thing is, it's really important that your child, I mean, first of all, they'll probably try and do this, and we're going to try and move away from that quite quickly. So with scissors, the thumb goes on the top, so thumb on the top. Okay. And the other thing that I like to encourage is that the index finger goes outside the loop and underneath the blade, and that just gives loads more control. You try it yourself. If you feel the difference, in terms of control, you get a lot more control if your index finger is underneath the blade. So it's really important. Actually, these scissors aren't quite big enough for me to get 2 fingers in the bit, but 2 fingers in the loop and the index finger will work really nicely. So that is scissor skills. So that's super important. Now, scissor skills are really helpful for if you can see the action. So I'm building up strength and shape of my hand. Okay, so I'm not doing this with straight fingers, you know, I'm trying to get that curve, and I've got this really nice shaped hand. So it's great for hand shaping. It's also really great for differentiation of function. So one hand holds while the other hand is doing. So we've got doing hand, helping hand. We've got eye-hand coordination. So I'm going to aim to go somewhere, and I've got to really hold my attention to look for where I'm going. You've got a whole load of stuff for pressure. So, you know, using card or paper or tin foil or whatever it is you're trying to cut through will feel different. So you get that feedback. So it's just a really great all-round activity. And it lays the foundation for pencil skills, for using a knife and fork, for example, and all other sort of tool use. Now, I quite often will start at, first of all, I'll do a warm-up activity using tongs. So you can see there's a nice picture of some tongs, and the little one using, I think they maybe got some strawberries there, which is fun. But, you know, do a tongs activity, so warm up those muscles first. Then early skills are either snipping through things like Play-Doh or disposable straws, plastic or paper, whatever you've got, just literally snipping off through straws. I found in the past that, you know, you can load up a Thomas the Tank Engine truck with little bits of straw, and they can then go for a ride, or you can have a tipper truck, or, you know, you've made jewels, or you could then thread them and make a necklace for mummy, or whatever it is. So that's quite a nice activity to just snip through straws. It's super easy, and you've just got an immediate result. Now, if your child is struggling to hold scissors, and lots of the children we're thinking of do, these boingy scissors are really nice, these looped scissors. You can just get these off the internet. I've never seen them in just regular high street stores, so off the internet, but you'll be able to buy them. They're not too expensive. So that's a small set, and you can get larger ones there. You can get some that have extra loops. So if your child had a physical disability, had a real difficulty holding, you can get some that have extra loops. But these are great, and it actually means that your child can still snip without having to worry about the holding of the scissors. So sometimes I start off with these. And the other thing is you can get these training scissors that have an extra bit that kind of sticks out, and that almost turns, if you can imagine, it's a bit like secateurs. They have a spring, they're spring loaded, so they boing open. So you can get those from, again, online or from some of the bigger stationers shops sell these too. So that's a real top tip for scissor skills. So worth spending time on. And then you can get, this little guy here brilliantly, so you can see what he's doing. He's really looking, and he's got some wobbly scissors, so he's probably cutting something fun out there. Then the other thing that is really important with scissors is learning to re-grasp. So when you're cutting out, you learn to, you will cut, and you'll then, sticky piece of paper, you'll then cut, and then you'll re-grasp, and then you'll re-grasp, and then you re-grasp. Now, lots of children don't do that. So they will end up moving their body, or they'll end up crinkling the paper, trying to cut round, or they'll just end up like with a mess, or they'll end up tearing the paper. So that's often where the skill breaks down. It's less about that. They'll be probably using their mouth to help them do the opening and closing, and then they tighten up and scrunch their helping hand, and actually what they need to do is let go of that and re-grasp. So you've got to look for that, and this is a really nice thing from a lovely website called mamaot.com. I'd recommend having a rummage on there because there's lots of lovely ideas, but this is just for helping right-handed or left-handed children learn where to put their thumb. So the numbers are where you put your thumb, and you start on the right hand side here, and you would go around that circle, and as the curve goes round, you then move to number 2, and then you go further around the curve, you would actually then go to number 3, where the number 3 is. So that's kind of a fun way of teaching a slightly older child about how to refine that skill. So it's a nice idea. Your child, often we find children on the autism spectrum have significant likes and dislikes about certain textures. So I just got a few ideas here of introducing textures or other materials, particularly those malleable materials we were talking about, or perhaps even cooking type textures. What I would say is let the child watch you do it first, watch a sibling do it, watch their superhero special friend do, their toy could do it first, whatever it is. Let them watch and just sort of imagine what it's like. And if they can do that without gagging or without kind of feeling too anxious, that's great. And then it might be that they could help Teddy or their superhero, or they could hold your hand while you do it, so they kind of get the idea. What you can also do is put the textures, or say for example Play-Doh, inside one of those Ziploc bags, get rid of all the air, and they can then squish it without actually feeling the sense of stick and goo on their hands, and that's just a really good place to start. Things like finger paints and stuff are really lovely inside Ziploc bags, because you can draw sort of shapes and things in them. So yeah, do that first, and then a bit of a rule of thumb is use dry items before using wet items, or without mixing the textures. So dry pasta and so on, and dry cereal is kind of fun. You can crash all the cars into there and try and rescue the cars. Obviously you're not going to be eating the cereal after that, but I have done things like dinosaur swamp. So we've had cereal, and then we've had some instant hot choc stuff, and we've maybe mixed that with a bit of cold water, and we've made like a swamp, and then the dinosaurs have gone for a little wade in there. And quite often that's been a fun thing to do. You kind of have to stand back and be prepared to clean up the mess, but if you're prepared, you can embrace that, or maybe out in the garden when the sun's shining. Other things like just mixing with spoons and whisks and mashers and that sort of thing is quite a fun thing to do. And if your child will have a go, then that's great. And I would also say, you know, there's a whole other talk about feeding issues, and that touches on the sensory side of things. And there's also a really good talk by an OT about the sensory side of things. So I'm not going to talk about it in any detail, but it is okay to play with food from a texture point of view. And if you think about back to that eye-hand triangle that I spoke about at the beginning, that children and their sensory cortex in their brain need to get used to things. They need time, and some children need a lot more time to process the way things feel. And before putting a new food in their mouth, they might actually just like to mash it or prod it or feel it, sort of look at it for a bit longer. And then maybe next meal time they'll look at it again, but maybe they might touch it this time before actually then trying it in their mouth. So I think go gently and allow children to feel and touch their food is actually really important. Just thinking about that early child development sequence, that lots of children maybe might need to go through that every time they can encounter something new. So talking of food, some ideas of how you might be able to, so you probably, I don't know, in lockdown, lots of people have been doing bits of baking and so on. It might have gone well, or it might have been a bit of a disaster, but I've got some ideas of using food and to develop fine motor skills. So things like snapping and dipping are a really good activity. You know, you might snap a big breadstick and break that up and dip it into, it might just be some tomato ketchup, or it might be something like some hummus or something, depending on what your child can maybe tolerate and enjoy. But that's a really nice activity to do. And you know, the children might like to, you know, break up and give a bit to mummy or whatever, and to share. Things like squeezing and wrapping or unwrapping things are really important. You know, being able to open packets and so on, or you know, those clippy boxes that lots of us have at home now. Peeling. Now it's interesting, there's a little chap here and he's got a big block of cheese and he's just using a potato peeler to peel the cheese. It's possible that not everybody will want to eat the cheese after that's been peeled, but that's a kind of a nice thing. It's kind of resistive, and actually it's kind of fun, you know, and if a little bit gets eaten, that's great. If it goes on top of the pizza, nice. So you can think sort of inventively about actually how, and again, he's got a really nice example of a doing hand and a helping hand there. Spreading bread, making sandwiches. There's a little idea here with a guy who's got one of those, you know, protein shakers, or some of us have them for fit drinks and things. Well, why not put some milk and a banana in there and smush it all up in one of those shakers? That's a really nice activity. The big, you know, physical fine motor activity, maybe you've sliced the banana before it's gone in there. So things like, you know, graters, and then you squeeze your bottles for ketchup. And that little guy there is, I think things like peeling satsumas is really great. And that little guy there is husking corn on the cob. Have a go. It's fun and it's really resistive, particularly for children who are learning about the proprioception, that body awareness, and knowing how much strength to use. And maybe compare how much strength for an easy peel satsuma and taking the you know, the outsides off a corn. You know, can they tell the difference? It's interesting. And then just talking about eating and feeding, I found this picture online, and when I was looking for examples to put in this presentation, I think it sort of tells a big story, that actually here's some adults sitting on massive chairs. I think it's been photoshopped, but it's interesting, isn't it? We expect lots of children, toddlers, who are learning about their postural stability still, to sit at a table, do quite a complicated thing like trying to feed themselves when the table's too high and their feet are off the ground. Well, I think if you tried to, say, thread a needle sitting on a bar stool without your feet, you know, on anything, that would be a real challenge for you posturally, and it would be tricky. So if you were trying to do quite a high level, you know, motor task when you're posturally not very well supported. So I'm not necessarily saying that everybody has to go out and buy one of these funky wooden chairs, although they're great because they grow with the child. But what you could do is really simply just put a foot box underneath there, or raise the child up on something stable, nothing too squidgy like a cushion, but something stable. You can get booster seats, and maybe even a cushion behind their back, so that actually they're sitting stable and they're at the right height. The table isn't here. So that's really important, and it is important for children to graduate on from high chairs, or the restrictive high chairs if it's at all possible. But think about their position. Then we're talking about chaining, and if the child's learning to feed themselves, do you allow them to do the first bit and you then do the rest, or do you wait until it's like their favorite bit? If pudding is a really motivator, that you feed them the first, or you do help them a lot more for the first course and they then feed themselves their yogurt or whatever it is that's coming up later. You need to think about the psychology and what will motivate your child. Personally, I feel it's really helpful if you do a lot of the work and the child does the last bit, so they get the successful bit. So that can be really helpful. I'm going to talk to you about cutlery. So there are lots of different types of cutlery out there, but what I would say is that it's really important, rather than just the straight, flat, slightly chunkier children's cutlery, I think it would be really worth you considering looking for some slightly shaped cutlery that you can buy from some places, mostly online, although one of them, the Nana's Manners, I think is more universally available. But basically, I've got an example of an adult size one. So if you can see that this cutlery sits in the hand here, so that's nice and stable. And there's a bit here, there's like a dimple here where my finger will sit. It's slightly more pronounced in the children's version. But I've got one for my fork as well. And then I've got, my hands are really nicely stable. So this is the adult's version of the caring cutlery. But all of them are very similar. So Cura cutlery, caring cutlery, Clever Grip, which are new or new to me. I've just seen them there from fledglings, or they're Nana's Manners. I think they might have been on Dragon's Den. You can get them in these in all different funky colours, but they're really shaped cutlery. So they're all slightly different sizes, and if you've got an older child, maybe age 10 plus, you can get adults versions of the Cura, not in this horrible kind of peachy colour. You can get, it's quite smart grey and dark grey, and I think there's some black ones as well, so slightly smarter cutlery for older children. Having a good stable grip is really important. Thinking about your pointing finger pointing down to where you're going, that really helps the child learn to, that hand stays still while this hand moves. So again, it's doing hand and helping hand. Quite often I will use, I'll use the good old therapy putty to practice with. There's a picture here with a green sausage, that's therapy putty and an OT doing cutlery practice, but you could use bananas, or you could use a cheese string, or something that's quite sort of, quite easy to cut, but just gives a little bit of resistance. It's kind of a fun thing to practice with first before doing a whole meal. And then we're quite close to the end here, we're nearly there, but some other ideas. So that's a big plastic lettuce knife, which is, they're less sharp than regular knives, they're nice and lightweight and really easy to chop up. That's a courgette, which is also going to be easy to chop up. Doing things like pegging out, if you could make a washing line and pegging things onto the washing line. You can even do literacy activities with pegs. But also I play a game where we'll do pegs onto my clothes, and then I've got to pick the pegs off and peg them onto the child, and the child's then got to peg them onto me or onto the back of their t-shirt. And actually that's a really fun game for children who are starting to learn to wipe their bottom, is taking pegs off or putting pegs on the back of their t-shirt, so they're starting to feel what it's like to be round the back, because often that's really hard. If I can't see my hands, I can't see what I'm doing. So that's one hot tip. This is a button snake, super easy to make. If you were feeling really crafty and your child liked the very hungry caterpillar, for example, you could have the button snake with a little eyes on, looking like a caterpillar. But basically, this is a really super easy way to learn to button. So it's like threading, but I'm going to give my button to the other hand, but it's just through the hole. So I'm giving the button to the other hand through the hole. So I've got various things. So I've got a there's a smaller button on one end and a larger button on this end. You can, raid the button drawer and just get really big buttons off coats and so on, maybe, that you might have kicking about, and sew them just onto a shoelace or something like that, and it's quite a nice fun activity to do. Get your child involved if you can, doing things like watering stuff or putting their own stuff away or putting cans away. This little one down on the left is just folding things, folding your tea towels, or folding flannels, or balling socks and putting them in the drawer. Even if you have to do the activity again later once they've gone to bed, it's still a fun thing to do, and they're learning about one hand does one thing and one hand does the other, and I might have to change my grip. So we have come into land. That's the end of my presentation. There's a few other little top tips. Do go onto the Chimpanzees website for some other fine motor resources that are there. There's also lots of people like Pinterest. I really like it. As an OT, I use it a lot for resources. Lots of other OTs do. So if you use the words fine motor skills activities or fine motor OT, you will get a wealth of ideas. Just some fun ideas, and taking the principles that I've talked you through today, you will suddenly see new opportunities in activities that will be there. There's quite a nice new resource that's actually a Scottish resource that I came across recently that's got some lovely resources. This NHS GGC, I think it might be Glasgow sort of area, and they've got some really lovely kids resources, not just OT stuff. There's some other disciplines there, but they're really nice, simple to follow guidelines on fine motor skills development. And then these are books that I like. I like lots of books, but these are kind of some of my top 10. Really, there's a fine motor skills for children with Down syndrome, not just for children with Down syndrome. Really helpful for any child learning new skills who's got developmental delays. I would say it's really, really helpful. This one here is a really useful resource. It's got so many practical activities, lots of photocopiable pages. It's an American book. You can get it over here. It's by an organization called Teacher Created Resources, and I recently got a second-hand version of Abe or off Amazon. You'll probably still be able to find it. And then Alistair Bryce Clegg is absolutely fantastic for all things early years in terms of learning motor skills, learning skills really full stop. He's been on the TV on a few different programs, but this book here, Getting Ready to Write, talks you through the activities for the shoulder, for the elbow, for the wrist. Some really lovely, and that's where the Jedi writing idea came from, and also where the melon with the hammer and the and so on. There's lots of other lovely ideas and lots of really nice recipes for different types of Play-Doh and so on in there. So that's a great book. So that is the end of my talk. And thank you so much for listening, and thank you for hanging on in there. I'm really happy to take questions now.